Welcome to the Beyond the Veil Summit, a free online event where you'll explore the mysteries surrounding near-death experiences, mediumship, and the science of the afterlife. Share this event with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Lisa Bonis.
Welcome to this session of the Beyond the Veil Summit with my guest, Don Oscar Miro-Quesada. Our topic today is NDEs, OBEs, and UFOs. Otherworldly harbingers of planetary shamanic initiation. Don Oscar Miro-Quesada Soleva is a respected Camasca curandero and ultimosaic adept from Peru, the founder of the Heart of the Healer, and the originator of Pachacuti Mesa tradition cross-cultural shamanism. An internationally acclaimed shamanic teacher and healer, earth-honoring ceremonialist and author, Don Oscar is OAS Fellow in Ethnopsychology and member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. His ceremonial work and shamanic apprenticeship programs have been featured on Sounds True, CNN, Univision, A&E, Discovery Channel, and the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. Don Oscar, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Always a pleasure and a deep honor to support the great work that you are doing, Lisa, through the auspices of the Shift Network, especially during these very challenging times in the birthing of a new planetary culture. Us two-leggeds, as you well know, play a significant role in being able to usher in a different way of being in sacred relationship with all our relations, human and non-human. And my own life has been a testament to that deepening of relationship with those presences, those possibilities of human experience that usually remain hidden from our rationalistic and objectified modern or postmodern psyche. So I'm looking forward excitedly to sharing some of my personal experiences as to how I see the unfolding of this Pachacuti, this world reversal, this great turning, being an opportunity for us to midwife a new human presence upon planet. Thanks for having me here.
Well, thank you again for being here. You and I have had many conversations in the past, and you've got so many fascinating stories to share on so many subjects, but today, let's focus on something that we've never talked about before, NDEs, OBEs, and UFOs. That's a lot of letters going on in today's conversation. But let's begin with your near-death experiences, if that's okay.
Certainly. Now, there's a story behind this, and I need to set it up by telling you that few people know that before I became known as a teacher of cross-cultural shamanic healing arts, I did have a life. And my life consisted of a lot of scholarly work and a lot of involvement in academia and research organizations dedicated to deathcraft, to understanding survival after bodily death. As a matter of fact, early on in my academic pursuits, I took an associate's in life science with a focus in microbiology and psychoneuroendocrinology. And then I went to Duke University to do my bachelor's degree simply because J.B. Rhine, the father of modern American experimental parapsychology, was there at the time, still alive. And I had an opportunity to go to many other schools, yet I went specifically to Duke because the foundation for the research on the nature of man that Rhine founded was right there. And it turned out that where I lived was like on the same block that the Institute was. So I spent a lot of time doing research in parapsychology there as a hobby while I was taking my bachelor's degree in psychology at Duke. Following that, I decided to continue my interest in the exploration of these anomalous phenomena, yet not so much from a reductionistic and experimental point of view, as was the case with the Rhine Institute, yet more from a spiritual point of view, more from a perspective of transpersonal psychology. So I took a master's degree at the State University of West Georgia psychology department, or transpersonal psychology and humanistic psychology department, that was founded by Abraham Maslow. That was at Brandeis at the time, and then he was brought down to Georgia and founded this very cutting-edge, leading-edge program. So I'm giving you all this background, and after that I went into a 2-year specialization degree in ethnopsychology at Emory University. But I'm giving you all this background so that our listeners and our viewers can understand that what I'm going to be presenting today is a type of shamanism, yet a shamanism of the scientific new discovery about the survival of consciousness following bodily death, that goes way beyond our understanding of consciousness just as an epiphenomenon of our neural pathways or our physical brain, that it is a priori, that it is the fundamental field, the noosphere, that is propelling us toward an evolutionary leap as humankind. Because there's a question I asked myself that I wrote down before I came on this recording, this teaching, and it says, are Homo sapiens as an earth-bound species on the tree of evolution? Are they a dead end on that tree of evolution, or a bridge between human and para or metahuman organismic beings? In other words, are we right now a bridge, a connecting field of possibility to transcend the human limitations and our encapsulation within body, and be able to transcend what normally is associated with our biological determinism? Or if we continue the way we are, all we need to do is look around us and see the Anthropocene, the human-caused climate emergency that we're in, a dead end to evolution on this planet. It's a critical moment. So this background that I had, other than just my own shamanic experiences, was prompted by my early childhood near-death experiences, 3 of which I had. The first being at age around 2 years old, that I still have a little scar from, where I was electrocuted. I don't have recollection of that. Yet my father, who was a physician, a clinical oncologist that dedicated his life to research and public health in Peru, recounted that experience. And when he started to tell it to me when I was older, I relived it viscerally. And I remember that experience of leaving my body, that is the classical phenomenology associated with near-death experiences. And so I had no breath. I was blue. I was dead, my father said. And all of a sudden I took this big, huge breath and boom, popped back in. But since that moment and forward until I was 10 years old, I remember living in between worlds. I remember not feeling like I belonged within this society, within this life, and never found my place. On top of that, I suffered from very severe asthma, and that required for me to be taken away from Lima, which is on the coast, deep humidity, a lot of pollution, being a large urban metropolitan center, because I couldn't breathe. I was on dexamethasone IV, steroids to open up my alveoli to help me to breathe. So my early childhood was spent in isolation, pretty much in my bed. I couldn't complete my 5th grade, so they sent me up to the mountain areas of Chosica, where there was much better air, and I spent 1 year there, and that's where I had my experience, my second near-death experience that I remember very, very clearly. that is recounted in the book Lessons in Courage, Peruvian Shamanic Wisdom for Everyday Life. That gives a basis for how that was my first rite of passage, my first shamanic initiation, my first dismemberment and rebirth, and my first encounter with what I called the shining ones, the beings of light. I'll get into that a little bit more, Lisa, but I'm just setting up our discussion, even though there's not much dialogue between us right now, but it's important that I offer this foundation. The third experience of near death that I had resulted when I turned 33, and that was the result of an auto accident. And I was very conscious of how to negotiate with the angel protector that showed up during that phase of near death in which you move into the light, and then beyond the light, in which you can also interact with departed loved ones and other spiritual allies that either you have met in this or other lifetimes, and receive guidance from them. And because of my still undeveloped spiritual humility, I started to argue with this angel that appeared to me, discussing the nature of the universe of life and how what he was presenting to me was contrary to what I had assumed or basically decided was truth, which resulted in an interesting and a very humbling lesson as well, which I'll touch into at the right time as well. Now, all that said and done, I show up to this summit as an example of individuals that more and more are showing up on planet who have either had conscious or spontaneous near-death experiences, who have had Kundalini awakenings increasingly, who have had non-ordinary states of visionary encounter with realms of reality that usually are not present except in our dream life, and even in our dream life, rarely, because they all contain deep initiatory teachings and transmissions of a new vision of what's possible for humankind to become. And also that having a lot of out-of-body experiences. On top of that, we have the rampant phenomena of unidentified flying objects and the increasing amount of Marian apparitions that you hear about, those of the Virgin Mary showing up. So we have this visitation from beyond the veil that is now becoming part and parcel of our human collective psyche, of our planetary field of consciousness. And that is very exciting if we learn to develop an alliance with this opportunity to exist both here in the three-dimensional physical plane, as well as in the transdimensional or transcendental realm that is the source of all this, quote, anomalous phenomena that is now showing itself in such rampant manner in the experiences of many people on Earth. I feel that there is an inherent intelligence behind what is happening on this planet, including that of the great ecological catastrophes that we're witnessing, the social unrest, the racial inequities, the economic disparity, and the general human malaise that is the result of a resistance to change that is occurring. Is an opportunity, like in all shamanic initiations, to die and be reborn. Yet the main problem we have right now is that we do not have a death craft. We do not have a system of befriending our mortality, our death, in a way that makes it clear that that consciousness itself, or soul, doesn't like to be constrained. Its nature, its essence is self-movement, change, transformation, not being restricted in any manner. Soul needs spaciousness to roam and enter into its inherent paradoxical, ambiguous, and ambivalent relationship with the unknown. And that is why our imagination is so much more important than our reason right now in crafting a path of relationship with the afterlife before we need to die physically. In other words, replicate what our ancestral cultures, especially those shamanic originating peoples, as well as all of the mystical traditions and world wisdom schools and initiatory orders that you hear about, that had very well serving techniques, tools, and rites of passage that allowed those prepared to cross over to enter into the realm of the non-living on a physical level and be able to bring back that experience as a means of transforming those that in their environment were open to it. All of the great spiritual teachers of old had some sort of encounter with the other side, with beyond the veil. Everyone from the Nazarene to the Buddha, to Sai Baba, to Padre Pio, to Mother Teresa, to all of the contemporary as well as ancestral avatars and pioneers, those who walked before us that we must be very grateful for, have discovered and revealed in their writings and in their way of being the reality of another parallel realm of existence that is so much more than what we have here on planet. Now, that is not to say that what we have here on planet isn't something that first and foremost we must strive to protect, to better, and to enter into deeper harmony with than we are at current. That is indispensable for, even on the other side, you still must grow corn and potatoes. You still must enter into a life of service and into a life in which your thoughts, your words, and your actions must be aligned with what is good for the all. And that brings me back to my own near-death experiences and how that changed my way of being less self-absorbed, free of narcissistic desires and impulses, and most importantly, free of fear, free of the necessity to hold on and grab on to certainty or certitude, or just strive for, how could I say, personal security, which I realized that our efforts to attain personal or security really puts us at peril. The more a person strives to have something that will make them safe, it's often the case that they sacrifice the well-being of others. And we can experience that basically on the bottom line based corporate consumerist manipulating agenda that has placed our planet in such peril right now that is at the root of our postmodernist and technologically obsessed, algorithmic laden envisioned future. We are right now at a breaking point, my dearest, which is really a positive thing. So, those are my opening statements.
All right. Wow. There are so many different directions we can go with that. But let's start with one of the things that you mentioned that really tweaked my interest was you talked about during your second NDE, you had an encounter with 3 shining ones. Can you tell us about them and what did you learn from them?
Gladly. I'm having a little bit of a deja vu. I feel we've had this conversation before. Maybe we have, and if not, we did have it anyway. So, what happened was this. I was up in Chosica, 11,500, almost 12,000 feet above sea level. Central highland area east of Lima because of my asthma. One night, I went into hypoxia. I had a suffocation attack because I could not breathe. And I felt myself dying, losing all life force, all energy was just seeping out of my body. And things were getting darker and darker, and I wasn't breathing, and I just closed my eyes and let go, and I heard my name being called in this very distant type of resonance, like if being called out of some sort of vacuum. And they were calling my nickname at the time that my father had given me because I was very curious and always used to, as a baby. So he called me Eager Beaver, way before the show Leave It to Beaver ever came on television. And so I heard my name being called from this distant vacuum-like space, Beaver, Beaver. And this may seem incredulous to most people listening to me right now, but I'm telling you the way it is. And all of a sudden, I managed to open up my eyes laying in bed, and in the room I was in, which had a very small window in it, it was like radiant with light. And in front of me, I saw this very tall, luminous being, almost like it was about a 7-foot pillar of light. And to my left and to my right, flanking my bed, were 2 other beings of light. And they asked me to sit up, and they started to communicate telepathically. And that brings in another dimension of this planetary rebirth that we're in that activates and catalyzes a lot of psi, a lot of telepathy, ESP, psychokinesis, a lot of capacities that are dormant in humankind that are becoming activated in many people. Hence, even the greater urgency to have a practice in which you may cultivate those skills in a manner that is healthy and not destabilizing. So I was in this total telepathic communion with this main shining one that was in front of me. So instead of hearing words, I was seeing images. And he was showing me images of myself when I was born, my early first 10 years, and into the future, and what my life would be like, indicating that it wasn't time for me to cross over yet. And that the relationships I'd have, the education I'd attain, the service work I'd do, the lovers I would have, the children, everything was laid out to me. And I still had the asthma at that time. And then after he completed that transmission of my life's path, he nodded to the other shining one that was to my left, and this other shining one kind of arced over. The best way I can describe it is that it's like a willow tree with tentacles coming down of light, arced over and placed his lips over my area of my chest here, and began this classic shamanic extraction, this suction. and just sucked out all of the asthmatic condition I had and blew it out through the roof of the room, through the ceiling of the room. And all this miasm, all this constricted air just transmuted into particles of light and just disappeared. And from that day forward, I never had asthma again. Remember, to breathe, I was getting intravenous cortisone, dexamethasone, so I can breathe. My father and the other colleagues and specialists that were treating me did not believe, they could not believe that I no longer had any respiratory ailment after that. A little fast forward, I did not recollect anything that happened to me. I went into a state of amnesia, as a matter of fact, because it would have been very destabilizing to the point now in retrospect, it probably would have resulted in some sort of psychotic depersonalization on my part if I had remembered that in the details that had happened to me at that time, because I was still in that process at age 10 into my formative teenage years where our identity is still very porous, and I would have probably had some sort of identity diffusion or some sort of crisis that would have been very difficult if I had to deal with a full recollection of that experience. Yet, as I matured in age and got to be almost 18, when I first encountered my shamanic mentor, Don Celso Rojas Palomino, and had my first mesada, my first shamanic ceremony with him that involved the imbibing of San Pedro cactus. This was in the northern coastal area of Peru. Out of the center of the mesa, out of the center of the altar, emerged these three beings of light. And Don Celso, we're in the pitch dark, and Don Celso nudges me like this, and he says, "Do you remember them?" And when he told me that, and I saw this, you can imagine my entire understanding of who I was, what reality is, everything just became a convoluted, spiral propulsion, which disseminated me, which just dissolved me, and I became a non-Oscar. I became an awareness without body. I don't know how long that took, but eventually I came back, and I asked Don Celso, "What more can you tell me about this?" He said, "It's up to you to call them forth on a daily basis. When you lie down to rest at night, they will be there. They will reveal everything." So I went into a process of a daily recollection, just like you do that recollection prior to entering into the next phase or the next bardo after the bardo of pure clear light, as they call it in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Chonyid bardo. The second phase is where you can really look at everything that you have done in this lifetime in detail, as well as establish relationships with both benevolent and wrathful deities that are just projections of your own psyche, right? But so I used that moment much like you would use a recollection period in the Tibetan sense in preparation for your next incarnation. And they revealed everything that they had told me at that moment. And still to this day, they are present in my life in the form of dreams, and at times when I'm doing shamanic ceremony, I shall consciously invoke or invite one, two, rarely all three of them into the lodge in which I'm working so that they may assist other people open up to what lies beyond the veil. And of course, that is an extremely transformative experience for any human being, and I'm not the only one who has had that type of encounter, yet it is becoming more and more prevalent in the world because of us reaching this cusp of the Pachacuti, of the great turning, where death must become our ally. Consciousness is not going to do it by itself. The ability to know that you are immortal, beyond your attachment to who you are as a physical entity right now, that freedom from fear is the key, in my humble opinion, so that every individual who has had an encounter with the other side will be a catalyst, contribute to a larger unfolding and birth of a planetary human presence that we're destined to attain as beings of light ourselves. Ultimately, those three beings of light were myself in the future. As any star relative that is envisioned in a starcraft visiting the Earth, which is very reductionistic in my humble opinion, is a witnessing of our own human capacity once we attain the ability to extend our consciousness beyond the confines of physicality. The externalization of consciousness is key to the survival of our species in that sense. I trust that this long-winded narrative answers your question, sister.
Yeah, not at all long-winded. I'm fascinated by what you're telling us, but I'm also wondering, how has, I know that you're involved in Peru's UFO contactee group. How did your experiences with the Shining Ones lead you down this path?
Well, following my near-death experience at age 33, age 33 was a very, very difficult time for me. I had, by force, had to return to work in Peru for the Organization of American States that funded my fellowship at Emory University to do those 2 years of postgraduate studies in ethnopsychology. And because I developed a program that mainstreamed folk healers, Peruvian folk healers, into the public health care delivery system in Peru, I created a pilot program that is now used, nationwide. So I went back to Peru. I had to leave my daughter in the United States under the care of her very psychologically unstable mother. And she was 1 year old, 1.5 years old. And so I was a bit lost, not a bit lost, I was lost. I was, struggling with life, with finding the way that I could really contribute in a manner that was uplifting, first to my child daughter, my baby daughter, and then to humankind in general. And also got involved in some very unhealthy relationships and started to engage in practices that were not, that were self-destructive, in a nutshell. And in one of those nights of self-destructive revelry, in the midst of the terrorist crisis that we had in Peru with the Shining Path, where there was a curfew out and you could not go out into the streets, I was inebriated, and all this is going to come to the UFO. It's all tied to it, to this group. I got in my brother's car, who had just died, and he had given it to me, a little Toyota Tercel, and started to drive like a wild man down by the coast of Lima, La Costa Verde, crying, emoting, in a state of total, painful catharsis, screaming out to Creator, to Source, that if you exist, give me a sign, you know, do something. And all of a sudden, all of the lights that were, you know, shining down on that track of highway on the coast of Lima started to go off repeatedly, sequentially. So everything got dark. And then all of a sudden, I heard this resounding voice: trust and remove your hands from the wheel and accelerate. And so I took my hands off the wheel, I pressed the gas pedal, and the car started to drive itself through these winding roads. And then up to because if anybody who's been to Lima knows that we have these big, it's like California, you have these big cliffs that go straight down into the ocean down below. I went up to one of those areas, like curved around, and was heading straight to an embankment that there was about a 300-foot or more drop to the bottom. And there was this, blockade there that said, danger, do not pass, precipicio or precipice. And I just continued to go, and boom, I blacked out. And then all of a sudden, I don't know how much time had passed, I'm in another neighborhood, not far from where that roadblock was, maybe 3 blocks from where that was, fully illuminated. Like the light in the neighborhood was intense, and it was nighttime, and it was curfew. And I heard this woman screaming out from a window, "Ladrones, ladrones, thieves, thieves! They are robbing this person. They're robbing this person." Yet I could not move. But I was still in my body at that moment. I couldn't move. I had no pain. I had no emotional turmoil, no suffering. And then I felt people rummaging through my clothes, taking my wallet out, going through the glove compartment. I could tell that they were doing something. I wasn't witnessing myself yet from out of body. I could just know what was going on. And I could hear him saying, está muerto, no tiene pulso, he has no pulse. He's dead, he's dead. So they stole my wallet, they stole all my ID, they stole everything from the car. And then all of a sudden, I hear this voice again, and it's, take a breath. I take a breath. Sit up. I sit up. Place your left leg outside of the door of the car. I put my left leg outside of the door of the car. Place your right foot outside of the door of the car. Place my right foot. Stand up. I stand up. And lo and behold, in this brightly illuminated, neighborhood, there was a group of children to my right, about 50 yards away, playing with a huge, colorful beach ball. And in the distance was walking this, for Peruvian standards, tall man, black hair slicked back, black leather jacket, black pants, with an STP race oil sign on his jacket, walking toward me, black shades, and introducing himself telepathically, and starting to tell me that I was dead, and that I had some choices to make at that moment, so that he could determine where my soul would best be served by these hierarchies, these angelic hierarchies that were waiting for my arrival. He asked me questions about my understanding of the human mind, of the universe, of cosmos. It was like an initiation into the highest level of metaphysics you could ever dream of. And it was right down my alley, because these are things I had been pondering over for many, many years as a student. And then he showed me a vision. Remember, these are all in images, not words, of my parents devastated by my death, because my older brother that I inherited the car from had just died at that moment. and of the type of life my daughter would have without me. Yet I was feeling so blissed out, so ecstatic, so free from bodily pain, from emotional suffering, so liberated. The experience of freedom from the constraints of my human earth walk were sublime. And easily I would have chosen to continue into that field of experience and see what lies beyond without attachment to being in control at all. I would totally surrender to that. Yet then I saw what I was leaving behind, incomplete. And I telepathically transmitted to him, yes, you're right, it's not my time. I must attend to the suffering of my loved ones, first and foremost. And at that moment, he said, sit back into the car, lay down, close your eyes, and poof, I was back in my body, you know, like boom, because it wasn't my physical body that had stood up before. It was my astral body, or the soul body, what we understand as the cuerpo sombra in shamanism in Peru. And so I was back in my body, yet I couldn't move yet. The police came because that woman called them. Oh, there was another piece there. When I started to feel fear in this situation, the children who were laughing and playing and throwing the ball retreated, like with fear from me. Anytime I would feel any concern, fear, or resistance to the experience, then I noticed that and I breathed through it and I just opened myself up and said, you know, I'm here. And, yeah, I understand my mind is doing this, da, da, da. And then they would get happy again, throw the ball, and ultimately they threw me the ball. And I received the ball and threw it back to them, and there was an interaction. At that point, you know, everything was cool with my relationship with this STP-wearing black James Dean type archangel. I don't know what he was. And so I'm back in the car, the police come, they take me to the police station, they put a sheet over me. All of a sudden I breathe, come back to life, sit up, sheet falls, police freak out, no ID, crazy stuff, boom, bing, bang, bang. Go back to my house the next day. In my room, I was living in my mother's home at the time, in Lima. I'm called at nighttime to look out the front window of my room, and I see this bright light in the sky, hovering there. It transmits this beam of light into the window, back to the wall, that bends and starts to move down the hallway outside of the door of my room, and obviously telling me to follow it. So I follow it. It goes down the hallway, 2 doors down into my mother's sewing room where she used to do her sewing, goes up the panels of her cabinet into this very high top panel that you need a little stepladder to even reach, and starts to pulse there. So I go up there, I open up that panel, and there's a pamphlet that I'd never seen before in my life, together with another booklet from the Divine Light Mission that I was part of in my early years when I was in Connecticut, you know, Guru Maharaji Jay's Divine Light Mission. Anyway, next to that I had forgotten about, but this booklet called The Rama Mission, The Time for a New Humanity. I pick it up, and it's this mimeographed copy, and I start reading it, and it just all made sense. It was perfect. I was reading truth. So I set out to find Sixto Paz Wells, which was the founder of this UFO contactee group in Peru called the Rama Mission, which has scheduled contacts, scheduled meetings with our star relatives that originally inhabited a star system in Orion, a planet around the star Regulus, that now have a colony in Ganymede, Jupiter's largest moon. And I started to get involved. So the first time I had to follow Sixto all around for about a half a year. I couldn't come up with him. He was all over the place teaching. And So the first time we meet, he says, "We've been waiting for you." And he proceeded to tell me details of my own personal life that nobody could have known. So I said, well, something's going on here. I better get to be accepted by this group of interesting folks, and began a process of long initiation into the practices that are associated with opening up ourselves and sensitivity to making contact, conscious contact, as well as sometimes physical encounter with our star relatives that comprise the intergalactic confederation of star nations that have been assisting the conscious evolution of life forms within our own Milky Way since the latter stages of the Big Bang, once the planetary orbs were formed around certain stars that were in that Goldilocks zone, perfect for the emergence of organic life, which are many more than we could even dream of right now. So through that, I had remarkable experiences of encounter with our star relatives, which also in their etheric form are very similar to the shining ones that showed up during my near-death experience when I was 10 years old. Very similar. That's when they project themselves in their light bodies rather than risk being entrapped within the dense material field of a third-dimensional plane of consciousness. So there's, you know, it's a very delicate balance as to how they can really even show themselves in their real form. So they must project themselves in these angelic light-type beings that you hear about in all of the great epics of the world. The spiritual traditions of the world speak about these angelic messengers, right, of light. So lo and behold, things progress. I come back to the United States. I take a position teaching at West Georgia University in the psych department there. The harmonic convergence is happening. I sponsor the founder of the Rama mission to the harmonic to Atlanta, and then got involved. I was Southeast coordinator for the Rama mission in the United States. Men in black showed up to my classes, phone tapped, a bunch of surveillance, decided to leave the Atlanta area, the Carrollton area where I was living. I couldn't take it, didn't want to have anything to do with it. Come down to South Florida where I live currently. And guess what? The only place I could find to live at that time was Jupiter, Florida. So that was my first home. I was trying to get away from it all. And so that's how, over some deep inner inquiry as well as encounters with non-ordinary realms of human consciousness, I have realized that there's something vast going on our planet that is a true global shamanic rite of passage, an initiation that requires a pachacuti, a death and a rebirth. I want to show something later that we will go ahead and work with. So, take it from there, my beloved Lisa.
All right. Wow. So fascinating. We're running very, very low on time, though. And I know that you had a practice that you wanted to share. So this might be a good time to go ahead and do that if you'd like.
Certainly. And I do apologize for going over in time, but these experiences require sometimes detailed elucidation. So I'd like to invite everybody that is here taking this in, or even scoffing about it, although I doubt that that'd be the case given the title of this summit, to gaze into the following image and listen to the following words that came through as I was preparing for this presentation. understand that your soul is transcendent, immortal in being. So I'd like to invite you to speak out loud the following words. I am immortal in being, beyond form, fearlessly free to be, all worlds, times, and places that summon me. One more time, please. I am immortal in being, fearlessly free to be, all worlds, times, and places that summon me. I am beyond form. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, hold the breath, and gently exhale through the nose. Now kindly gaze at this image. Move within the center of the brow that you see depicted in this image. Allow yourself to pass through the veil, to move beyond the veil, and imagine, visualize, create that other side, that place beyond. You are the light, and the light is you. As light, you are infinite. As light, you are eternal. As light, you are ineffable. As light, you are all things. As light, you are a way shower. As light, your consciousness survives bodily death. Remember this, experience it, be it. Light, light, light. Lastly, I offer you this chaya, this aspersion of abre camino, of opening the pathway to the evolution of our human consciousness beyond the limitations of our ego. May you journey blissfully into the ever now, beloved change makers on earth. When I blow this aspersion into the screen, breathe in deeply, take it into your being, taste its sweetness, its soul nurturing medicine. as Gary Snyder says, for the children, stay together, learn the flowers, go light. Namaste.
Oh, thank you so much, Don Oscar. That was very potent juju. Thank you for that. Oh, wow. Now, before we close our conversation, I want to make sure that I mention your website where people can find links to your books, your Facebook page, your YouTube channel, and your courses, and that's heartofthehealer.org. Ah, wow. So once again, thank you so much for being with us today, Don Oscar. Are there any final words, or do you feel complete?
There's a saying, a Hasidic saying. It says, if the world is ending and the Messiah arrives, first plant a tree and then go see if the story is true. Let's keep this earth our priority. Keep it green, keep it living, beautify it in our thoughts, our words, our actions, in the best way you are called to do so. Only then will physically we be allowed to journey and colonize other worlds beyond this one. Doing so would be premature at this point until humankind makes its evolutionary leap into Homus Galacticus. We still have time. Those are my words.
All right. Well, thank you again, Brother Oscar, for being with us today. It is always such a deep delight to spend time with you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
An honor and pleasure. Thanks.
And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation in the Beyond the Veil Summit.
Thank you for joining us for the Beyond the Veil Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit beyondtheveilsummit.com. To join our global community of people awakening to their divine humanity and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for gathering with us and for sharing this healing path with your friends and family.